The Jester's Day. Chapter 1. Morning at Court. In the castle, mornings did not begin with roosters, but with shouting. In the guard barracks, soldiers cursed and sparred. In the kitchens, pots clattered as cooks barked orders. And above it all, laughter rang out, bright, a little false, like the tiny bells on a fool's cap. His name was Thibaut. No one knew where he came from. Some whispered he was the son of a miller. Others claimed a runaway monk, and still others swore he was a changeling left by the fair folk. But to the court, it mattered little. His task was simple: amuse the king. And today, the king was in no mood for mirth. Thibaut began his morning in the kitchens, as many jesters were allowed to do. Unlike other servants, a jester could walk freely through the castle. Kitchens, council chamber, even the king's bedchamber if summoned. It was part of his strange privilege. He belonged everywhere and nowhere. He stole a hunk of cheese, tossed a dried plum to a scullion, and whispered, "Salt the bread well today, lad. Our Lord is sour enough already, and it takes salt to cure bitterness." Then he set his cap upon his head. Bells jingled softly. In the hush of stone corridors, even a single chime carried far. At many courts, fools were more than clowns. They spoke truths that others could not, wrapped in riddles and jokes. Some were trusted messengers, others secret advisors. Under the guise of laughter, they could say the very things that cost nobles their heads. Thibaut knew this game better than anyone. The throne hall smelled of tallow candles and damp stone. Servants had scrubbed the flagstones with sand, but still the scurrying of rats echoed faintly in the corners. Vermin cared little for majesty. Courtiers already gathered, heavy silks, trimmed furs, glittering rings, and feathers. Peacocks had been imported at great cost, and their plumes were the latest fashion. The taller the feather in one's cap, the higher one's claim to pride. The king sat brooding. A sealed parchment lay on the table before him. Rumors whispered of poor harvests in the north and restless nights angered by new taxes. Such tidings always meant blood. "Fool," thundered the king. "You are not here to eat cheese. Make me laugh, or I'll see you hang at the gate." The courtiers laughed, but the laughter was strained, cautious. To laugh when the king laughed was not amusement, but survival. Thibaut rolled into the center of the hall, flipped on his hands, and raised his marotte, a fool's scepter topped with a carved wooden head. Some jesters kept a secret flask of wine inside, or a scroll of witty sayings. Thibaut carried a hidden die, fortune's tool. "My lord," he said, bowing with exaggerated grace, "I thought to play with you a game of truth and lies. But I fear, if I win, you may lose your crown." A collective gasp swept the hall, and then, to everyone's relief, the king roared with laughter. He enjoyed the jester's insolence, for no other tongue dared speak it. It was then that Thibaut noticed him, a man, cloaked in dark wool, standing apart in the shadow of a column. His face was barely visible, but his eyes, they were fixed on the jester alone. Not on the king, not on the courtiers, only on him. And in that gaze, Thibaut felt an old saying stir in his memory. "The fool is first to see the storm, for he alone is forbidden to close his eyes." The bells on his cap jingled once more, and his marat seemed to whisper in his hand, "Your game begins today."
The Jester's Day, Chapter 2, The Stranger in the Shadows. The day wore on, and with it the rituals of court. At noon, the banquet was laid. The smell of roasted venison, spiced with pepper brought from far Genoa, filled the hall. Trencher bread. Thick slabs of stale bread used as plates soaked up the grease. Nobles tore at meat with daggers and fingers, wiping hands on dogs waiting eagerly beneath the tables. Thibaut darted among them, cracking jests. He mimicked the bishop's solemn Latin, parodied knight's pompous oath, and even jangled his bells in the queen's direction, daring to tease her vanity. Some nobles smiled through clenched teeth. Others whispered that he should be whipped. But the king laughed, and that was all that mattered. When the feast ended, servants gathered the trenchers, sodden with gravy. These were not thrown away. By custom, they were carried to the gates for the poor, a ritual called the Feast of Mercy. Beggars and lepers crowded there every day, waiting for scraps from the royal table. It was there, at the outer gate, that Thibaut slipped away from the bustle of courtiers. He liked to watch the faces of the poor. They were the only ones who laughed at his tricks without fear. He juggled 3 bones, pulled a coin from a child's ear, and bowed as if he were performing for kings. And that was when the cloaked stranger appeared again. He did not line up for bread. He did not beg. He simply stood, tall and still, until Thibaut's juggling slowed and stopped. "Fool," the man said softly. His voice was steady, controlled. "You spoke boldly in the hall today, too boldly. Do you not know how dangerous truth is at this court?" Thibaut tilted his head, bells chiming. "Danger is my bread, master, salted, spiced, and swallowed daily." The man's lips curved, though not into a smile. "Then hear me. The parchment on the king's table, it was no mere harvest report. It is an order of execution. A lord accused of treason is to die at dawn. But his guilt is not his own. He was betrayed. And if the king has his way, his blood will be a lesson written on the scaffold." Thibaut's grin faltered, though he masked it quickly with a jig. "And why?" he asked, twirling his marat. "Would you whisper such things to a fool?" "Because," the man replied, stepping closer, "a fool may speak where a knight cannot, and laugh where a priest must stay silent. You may pass between lords and beggars, kitchens and chambers. You are both invisible and untouchable. Until the day you are not." He leaned in, his breath warm against Thibaut's ear. "Tomorrow, on the scaffold, you will stand near the king. You must watch. You must listen. And when the moment comes, you must choose." Before Thibaut could reply, the cloaked stranger melted into the crowd, swallowed by beggars and smoke. The jester remained at the gate, bells trembling on his cap. His marat whispered in his hand. quickly or slowly, jesters bleed like lords. And your game, Thibaut, has only just begun.
The Jester's Day. Chapter 3. The Scaffold. The city square was already alive when Thibaut arrived with the court. Smoke from roasting meat mingled with the stench of tallow candles and unwashed bodies. Merchants sold hot pies, watered wine, and ribbons for children. For the crowd, executions were not tragedies but festivals, grim theater where death was the stage and the king its playwright. On the scaffold stood the block, dark with old stains. Straw had been scattered to catch the blood, though everyone knew it would not hide the smell. At its side rested the great axe, wide-bladed, iron, sharpened until it gleamed. The condemned man was brought forth in chains, a lord, his cloak torn, his once proud beard matted. He walked steadily, but his eyes betrayed him. Fear flickered there, sharp and raw. Yet when he saw Thibaut among the courtiers, his lips moved soundlessly. One word: mercy. The herald unrolled the parchment and read in a booming voice, "By decree of our sovereign, Lord Alaric, traitor to crown and kingdom, shall forfeit his title, his lands, and his life. Let his fall be a warning to all who dare rebellion." The crowd roared approval. Stones and crusts of bread flew at the condemned. Some shouted curses, others laughed. Others pressed forward eagerly, as if thirsting for the first spray of blood. Beside the king, Thibaut stood in his cap and bells, his painted grin fixed upon his lips. To jest at an execution was common. Kings often demanded it. A fool's mocking rhyme could make cruelty palatable, turn a man's last breath into spectacle. The executioner raised the axe. The square fell silent. And then the king leaned to Thibaut. His voice was low, but cold as iron. "Draw it out, fool. The people want a show. When the head falls, you will mock him. Make the traitor's children ashamed of his name." Thibaut's bells trembled. He looked at the scaffold, at the trembling lord kneeling upon the straw. He remembered the stranger's words at the gate. "When the moment comes, you must choose." The axe lifted higher. The crowd leaned forward like a beast with many mouths. Thibaut stepped out, twirling his marotte. He sang loudly, voice carrying above the hush. "Strike once, strike clean. Let no soul linger in between. For mercy swift, though rare and small, is greater jest than cruelty to all." Gasps broke through the silence. Some laughed nervously, others muttered curses. The king's face darkened, but the executioner's hands did not falter. The blade fell swift and true. The head rolled into the straw. The crowd erupted, some crying, "Long live the king!" others booing, others spitting that it had ended too soon. But somewhere in the throng, two children clung to their mother's skirts, and in their tear-filled eyes was not hatred, but gratitude. Thibaut stood still, bells silent. The king's glare cut into him like a dagger. He had defied the order, wrapped his disobedience in a rhyme, and now the court knew it. Yet in the shadow of the scaffold, the cloaked stranger watched once more. And though the noise of the crowd thundered like storm waves, Thibaut heard the whisper of his marotte in his hand. Every jest has its price, and yours will be paid in blood or silence. The Jester's Day, Chapter 4.
Shadows in the hall. The corridors of the castle were colder than the square outside. Torches flickered along the stone walls, casting long shadows that twisted like specters. Thibaut moved quietly, bells muffled under his cloak. Every step echoed in the silence, a jester walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. The king's anger had been immediate. A private summons had pulled Thibaut from the crowd. In the dim light of the throne room, Alaric's eyes burned like coals. "You mocked my justice," the king said, voice low and dangerous. "You dressed cruelty in rhyme and made the people question my decree. Explain yourself." Thibaut bowed, hiding the tremor in his knees. "Your Majesty, I merely softened the blow, made the spectacle bearable. A jester is meant to entertain, not provoke rebellion." Alaric's jaw tightened. "A fine line you walk. One step further, and that line becomes your neck." As Thibaut waited for the sentence, a soft voice interrupted. From the shadowed doorway emerged Lady Morel, the king's advisor in matters of diplomacy and secret intelligence. She was known for her sharp mind and subtler cruelty than the executioner himself. "Majesty," she said, bowing slightly. "The fool's rhyme. It stirred something in the crowd. People whispered, but they did not riot. Perhaps his jest spared us further bloodshed today." The king's glare shifted to her, then back to Thibaut. The jester's heart hammered, not a life-and-death rhythm, but a pulse of opportunity. Lady Morel's intervention had bought him a temporary reprieve. "You see," she continued, ignoring the king's scowl, "there are forces within the city that move unseen. Merchants, guilds, even some knights. They observe, they whisper. A word of mercy can earn loyalty, or it can incite treachery. Our fool understands this instinctively." Thibaut could not hide a sharp intake of breath. He realized now the depth of the stranger's warning. Every jest had consequences, yet within those consequences there was power, subtle, hidden. The king finally spoke. "Keep your wits, fool. Your life is spared for now, but do not mistake my mercy for weakness." As Alaric turned and strode down the hall, Lady Morel lingered. "Come with me," she said softly. "You have a role to play that extends beyond bells and rhymes. Choices made in jest today may shape the kingdom tomorrow." Thibaut followed her into the secret chambers beneath the castle. Ancient maps, ledgers of spies, and letters sealed with wax filled the room. Here, among shadows and secrets, he realized that a jester's eyes, sharp, observing, underestimated, could see truths that kings and soldiers could not. And somewhere, deep in the cold stone walls, the cloaked stranger watched again, as if waiting for the next move in a game only he understood. Thibaut gripped his marotte tightly. The day of the scaffold was over, but the game had just begun.
The Jester's Day. Chapter 5. The Fool's Gambit. The underground chambers smelled of parchment, candle smoke, and damp stone. Thibault's fingers traced the wax seals on letters, each one a thread in the unseen web of the kingdom. Lady Morel's eyes were sharp, calculating. "The king trusts no one," she said. "And yet he must trust someone. You, Thibault, move freely where others cannot. A jester is ignored, underestimated. That is your power." Thibault nodded slowly. Every word rang with danger. In the square that morning, he had joked of tyranny. Now he would act to protect it, or betray it, depending on whose advantage he served. The first test came before sunset. A courier, hooded and silent, delivered a message hidden inside a loaf of bread. Thibaut broke it open, a plea for help from the city's guilds, threatened by mercenaries loyal to a rival noble. If the king remained unaware, chaos would spread. If he intervened too forcefully, rebellion could ignite. Thibault's instincts, honed by years of observing, mimicking, surviving, whispered a solution. He would use his role as fool to pass information, mislead, and mediate. That night, at the feast, he danced, tumbled, and sang, drawing laughter and attention. Yet beneath the bells and rhymes, he whispered warnings to knights, exchanged glances with merchants, and left coded signs for Lady Mirelle. Every move was a calculated step in a game of shadows. By dawn, the crisis was averted. The mercenaries, believing a royal inspection imminent, withdrew. The guilds stayed loyal, believing the king himself had sent reassurance. Thibault had maneuvered unseen, and no one suspected the jester behind the save. In the quiet, after the feast, Alaric approached. His gaze met Thibault's. For the first time, the king did not look angry or amused. He looked impressed. "You have kept the kingdom from chaos," Alaric said, "and done so with the very disguise that made me doubt you. Tell me, fool, is it luck or cunning?" Thibault bowed low, hiding a smile. "Majesty, perhaps both. Or perhaps a jester sees what others cannot, and speaks when others dare not." Lady Mirelle's voice echoed softly behind them. "And some lessons," she said, "are best delivered with a laugh." As the sun rose over the castle walls, Thibault realized that his day, one that had begun with ridicule, fear, and near execution, had ended with influence, survival, and secrets only he and a few others shared. The jester's bells no longer rang merely for entertainment. They rang for insight, for warning, for the subtle dance of power. And somewhere in the city, in the silent spaces between stone and shadow, the cloaked stranger disappeared, leaving behind a faint trace of a smile, a signal that the game was far from over, and that even a fool could shape the fate of kings.